Right. Welcome to STO Psych. I'm Stephen Downey, a clinical psychologist from Australia. Today we'll be doing a breakdown of a Reddit post from the Am I the Asshole subreddit, which I find amusing. Today we'll just be showing the real-time thinking of how I would approach something like this and sort of using content from Reddit, just to show, I guess, the thinking style. How does a psychologist think when we come at some of these things? Obviously, we don't all think the same, but that's how I think. When I approach something like that. Feel free to submit things that you'd like me to review in the comments, and I will try and get around to having a look at those. Doesn't have to be from Reddit. I'm open to doing other bits and pieces. I do this for fun, so we'll just see what comes through. Right, like if you like the content, subscribe if you want to see more of when I put bits and pieces like this out. Yeah, without further ado, we'll jump into what we're doing today. Link will be in the description of the video if you want to play along. So the way that we do this is we select the top one that is not an update or an edit, which looks like this one here. Interesting. Yep, looks like this one here. So the way that I do this is that's quite a lot of text, but okay. I will read through the whole post from start to finish. And then once that's done, I'll sort of give you some thoughts and run through a few questions that I think are sort of just worth thinking about when we do something like this. So we'll start by reading through it. Am I the asshole for saying that I wouldn't allow my brother and his kids to live with me when I buy my house? So I've been saving to put a down payment on a house in Brooklyn. It's been hard saving and skipping nights out, etc. But I've always wanted to have something in my name so that later in life it will pay off. I never usually tell my family about me making big decisions because in some way they always try to spin it to try to benefit them. I told my mum that I'm excited about a house that I saw. It's in Brooklyn, but in the suburb of Brooklyn. I'm not sure where this person lives. I'm assuming that makes sense. The house needs some work, new driveway paint. I'd definitely redo the kitchen. I've always been handy and I can do most of this stuff myself or figure it out. I've fixed and worked on my car by watching videos on YouTube, so I'd probably do the same with the house, but I wouldn't mess with the plumbing or electrical work. It's a decent-sized house, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, has a decent-sized yard. I told my mum about it, and she told my older brother. It's him, his wife, and 3 kids. They live about an hour and a half north, but he also works in the city like me. He called me and told me how our mother told him about the house. He does work as an electrician and said he could help if I needed. I thought, oh wow, that's great. He has his own house up north as well. I've been approved for the loan and waiting on paperwork, etc. He just called me today and asked when he and the kids are moving in because he has to ask off work to move things. I was confused because I thought he was just messing with me. So I said, wait, what are you saying? He said that he offered to do electrical work in the house so he and his kids should be able to live there. I explained to him in what world does he believe that doing electrical work equates to him living in a house that is mine. He started to go on about how having multiple kids is expensive and commuting every day for work is costly. I simply said, that's not my problem. You're an adult. I hung up on him. My mum called me screaming, saying, why am I promising to let my brother stay in the house and now changing my mind? I never promised anything to him, and it's annoying that he's trying to manipulate the situation. I told my mum that he offered to do electrical work and now is saying he's moving in. I told her he's not moving in and I'll hire someone else to do the work. She started to tell me they're close to losing their house and need help and that I should because we're family. I asked her why it is that the people who are telling someone else to help are always the ones not offering help. My mum telling me to help, but she not offering for them to stay with her. I said it's not going to happen. Majority of my family have been calling me and saying I am disgraceful. It's so annoying because I don't want my brother on the streets with his family. But what if I never got the house? They would have still been in the same predicament. I refuse to help. It makes me not even want to buy the house. Okay. Where would you start on something like that? Okay. Where I would start on something like this is people need to like set up boundaries earlier. I don't understand how these situations get to these points and then we're having like conversations around boundaries after the horse has already theoretically bolted. So yeah, you all need to like work on your boundaries and being clear around what is and isn't it. Because then yeah, what bugs me about this, right? So the thing that hits me first is not actually the brother. It's one thing to have an entitled brother. Okay. It's a completely different thing that your mum calls you screaming, saying, why am I promising to let my brother stay in the house and now changing my mind? And there's a few ways to come at this. right? One is mum doesn't know. It could be that the mother herself is being manipulative. We don't know. It could be that the mother always takes the other son's side, and so this is just a continuation of that. It could be that the brother has lied. Like, there's a lot of different ways that this can happen, but the bottom line is, I find it a little funny. Like, I try to be reasonably fair with my kids and not just sort of take one side without hearing out the other, I would hope. But here, it's like you just hear from one son, and all of a sudden you're on the phone. But then it goes to, majority of my family have been calling me and saying I am disgraceful. Okay. When I read this, I start to think, I wonder if this person is from essentially a non-Western family. So maybe family of immigrants, something like that, somebody from a collectivist culture where, unlike in an individualist society where we can just say and do whatever we want, I now wonder, is this person actually from, like, let's say, some kind of Asian background, in many African countries where, because the default is collectivism, aka you, the individual, barely exist, but you exist in a connection with your group. So your identity is the group identity. There's a lot of cultural clashes that happen with immigrants that come to Western countries where these sorts of things happen. So it could be this individual was raised in a Western country, Brooklyn. I don't know. I think there's a Brooklyn in UK and a Brooklyn in the US. So I don't know what Brooklyn we're talking about. I'm going to guess US, but I really don't know. Bottom line is, when the first generation immigrants, they are still essentially culturally identify with the country of origin that they came from. If that's a collectivist one, the children being raised in the individualist society often have this completely different thinking style where it's like, well, hang on, I'm an individual. It's completely okay for me to say no to my brother because my identity is not the group. My identity is myself, right? Where the family, which might still have those more collectivist values, is looking at a situation going, well, hang on a second. How dare you prioritize yourself above the rest of us? Like, what the hell's going on there? You're supposed to just sort of sacrifice for the group and we sacrifice for you. And that's just how this works. You know, there should barely be a question of whether or not your brother is moving in with you because he's part of the group. And therefore, if you were to say no, it's like you're actually opting out of the family group, right? And so it can create these horrendous clashes. Now, do I know that this person is a first generation, second generation immigrant, something like that? No. Those pieces to me start to sound like the sorts of issues that I hear with, yeah, particularly children of first generation immigrants. So that's just sort of my thinking there. What don't I know? So the first thing that hits me is that he never mentions that his brother is losing his house, but the mum does. So this just hasn't, if we're to believe this as read, this hasn't even come up so far in the conversation with the brother, who's just assuming that he's moving in and he's going to pay for it with some electrical work. And it's like, that's just not a fair trade. So if you're not paying in, and if you're not moving in and paying rent, what some work done once upon a time is just supposed to indefinitely pay rent. Like, that's a bit wild. But then this doesn't seem to happen. And I say that because when we go further on, it's because I don't want my brother to be on the street with his family. But what if I never got the house? That's a bit of a red herring. But it seems that this is the point at which he's now aware of, oh, okay, the reason that people are coming down on me here is because my brother's doing it tough. Why does he not know that from the brother? Because this seems to indicate to me that they're not actually close. Do you want to share a house with somebody who is struggling to this level and you just don't even know about it? Like, you know, he's moved an hour and a half away, but then drives in all the time. Why did he move an hour and a half away? Was that to buy his own house? You know, he's an electrician. Generally speaking, tradespeople are paid reasonably well in all the places that I know of that have a Brooklyn in it. So why does it then become the brother's issue that this brother is having financial issues, even if that becomes quite dire consequence? So I don't really understand about that. So yeah, moving on from there. Am I the asshole for saying I wouldn't allow my brother and his kids to live with me? There's so many levels to that. So I think there would be a situation where, let's say you're not close with your brother, but you don't want to see your nieces and nephews in trouble, where you would house your nieces and nephews whilst allowing your brother and his wife, presumably, to be adults and sort their problems out and to get the house that they need so that they can have the children live there. But I think they have a fair point. Where is mum in all this? Why is the brother the solution and not the mother? And that's a lot of pressure. The pressure's coming from the mum, the pressure's coming from the family. This starts to seem to me like in I think it's an Australian saying where they talk about crabs in a bucket, right? Where essentially once you start to do well, the people around you don't necessarily like it and can pull you down. And the fact that you are ahead seems to bring some kind of entitlement that other people can use the resources, etc., that you generate as if they're entitled to it. And this just has that kind of tinge that somehow, because this person is doing something with their life, I mean, these days, if you've been saving hard to pull off a house deposit, like that's hard work. Like, congratulations to this bloke, wonderful work. So I guess this just has that sort of feeling that other people feel like they are entitled to his success, and it's like that's part of the, I want to say, mentality of low socioeconomic that actually ends up keeping everybody down, because it's so hard to cross that barrier and get out because of the people that seem to believe that they have this sort of right to your situation. What else don't we know that we would want to know, or things that we'd need to ask? So straight off the bat, he says here it's him, his wife, and 3 kids, but then later on it's just he and the kids. I want to know, where is the wife in this? Are they together? Is this actually that they're in the middle of a separation? Does that change anything? Probably not, but I'm still interested. It could be. I mean, the brother's not apparently talking about his other issues. Are there relationship complications, etc.? And then you got to think about, do you want to be, if that's the case, involved in that? There's like a lot involved with sort of just having somebody, move into your house. This whole move in and not pay is wild to me. Like, I see this a lot, where just because we're family, we are able to presume. I have not experienced this in my family. I'd go so far as, like, my brother moved in whilst I was studying, and he rented the downstairs space, actually the space that I'm in at the moment. He rented this off us for years, and never skipped a payment. Was a wonderful tenant. I wasn't taken advantage of at all, and I think we gave him like a pretty bloody fair rate. But at the same token, like, there was just an expectation of, yeah, like, if you live here, you pay, and there's obviously some flexibility that comes with hard times and that kind of stuff. But yeah, when my brother does work for me, I always try to pay him. He doesn't always accept, but we work on that. Yeah, so I don't know. I think there's sometimes a bit of a lack of respect for the skills that somebody has got that then needs to be recompensed. So the brother is an electrician. My expectation would be that, yeah, if you get electrical work done by your brother in your house, there would be some form of payment, but then that payment needs to be sort of fair and equitable. And it might even take into account things like mates rates, etc. It doesn't have to, but it could. Not, now I get to live in your house and I decided that was the payment of my work. Like, that's just not how it works. So yeah. Is this person the asshole? Off the information that we have right in front of us here, I don't think so. Does this person need better boundaries? Yes. Are they holding okay boundaries at the moment? Yes, but it's not firm enough that the family doesn't feel completely like they can push those over. That is not what we're going for here. You want boundaries that are basically just sort of like, you know what? No. And if that's how you want to be, you can go and sort of talked over the air for a while, you don't need to tell me. Again, if there are cultural factors here, then we would need to be exploring that. And that would probably be up there at the top of my list of information that I don't know is there cultural stuff in here, in which case I would want this person to tell me about how does your culture work? What are the expectations? What are the likely implications for you going forward of how you navigate this situation, and sort of really exploring with them if there are cultural factors at play. Are there cultural consequences that we could expect? And is that something we want to take into account? Because as psychologists, often we default to, oh, I'm going to support you within the culture that I understand, which is, 9 times out of 10, that's fine. But often we don't do a very good job of asking, okay, like, if you did this, is this going to be perceived as some slight against the family? Is this going to bring, like for cultures that have an honor shame culture, is this going to bring a genuine shame on your family that they've raised a son like you that could have further impacts on you regarding, not just acceptance within the family unit, but, things like inheritances and stuff like that? Could this be having longer term impacts on you, given your cultural situation and how that works? So, but that would only be if that's present. What's a pathway forward from here? Boundaries. Like, I reckon I've probably mentioned boundaries in every video that I've done, and I anticipate that anybody that watches me, if it were a drinking game, is going to poison themselves. Boundaries are essential, and that's the pathway forward here. Firstly, if you don't want to live with your brother, you don't have to live with your brother. You set that up and you say to everybody involved, I've made my decision. I'm not going to have my brother live with me. That's it. People can, it doesn't matter, right? And then you do this technique that we call broken record. It's very annoying. If you think about a child that just says the same thing until the other person just gives up, that's actually what we're going for here. So we may end up talking about something like broken record and go, right, you've got to come up with a statement that works for you in your language that gets across the point of, I've made my decision. My brother's not moving in. Right? And then they say, oh, but he's going to be left on the streets. I've made my decision. My brother's not moving in. But, what about the kids? I've made my decision. My brother's not moving in. And as much as that is just so frustrating and appears childish, it is an incredibly effective technique for dealing with people with poor boundaries. Because the issue, what are we doing there? What are we trying to get around? People with poor boundaries tend to be manipulative. Why? Because it works. That's okay. I don't blame people for doing what works, right? But the way that they manipulate is typically through language. How do we defeat that? Completely. Get rid of language. Just get rid of it. You're just saying the same thing, right? And the idea is you don't deviate. And so that way there is no edge. There's no angle. They could say whatever they want. So you hate your brother. I've made my decision. My brother's not moving into my house. Just the same thing. It doesn't matter. And eventually they go, you're an asshole. And off they go. I've made my decision and my brother's not moving into my house. Until we're talking about something else, that's all I'm going to say on it, right? And that's what it looks like to reinforce a boundary like that, because people realize I'm not going to get anything out of you, and they give up and they go do something else with their life. And that's what we're chasing here. If you've made your decision, and yeah, there's going to be some consequences and some social consequences, it's going to suck. It really is going to look like figuring out for yourself, be very real with yourself. What are my consequences here? Am I willing to accept them if I take this pathway? Good. I forgot to increase the camera. Whatever. So what are my consequences? Am I willing to accept them? What is my final decision to myself, and how am I going to communicate that to others? And I would suggest in this circumstance that, yes, something like a broken record would be a good way to approach it, particularly if you're getting sort of attacked from multiple angles, and then they start to talk to each other, and it's sort of like, oh, all he was saying was, I've made my decision and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden they realize he's saying that to everybody. It's like, oh, we're not going to get anywhere with this guy. Done. At that point, your problem solves itself. You've got to be willing to accept the reputational damage and stuff like that comes with it. But that looks to me like that would be the pathway forward that I would suggest for this. So All right, we shall finish up there. That's been fun. Very different to usual. It's again more of just a life issue rather than I feel like it was just days of relationships and sex, and it's sort of like, okay, that's fun to talk about, but yeah, this is a bit more just like a real life complicated relationship issue where you're thrown into a situation that is not your fault, um, and then you've got to figure out what you're going to do with it, which often feels like a profoundly unfair experience. So yeah, fun times had by all. That was pretty fun. We shall finish up there, and I will catch you another time. All right, have fun, guys. See ya.